Have you ever wondered what happened to the biggest stars of the 1960s after the spotlight faded? Some were Hollywood royalty, adored by millions, but their stories didn't always have a happy ending. The 1960s was a golden era for cinema, filled with unforgettable stars who lit up the screen with their talent and charm. But for many, fame was fleeting. Some faced heartbreak, scandal, or shocking betrayals, while others simply vanished from the public eye. Today, we're diving into the tragic fates of Hollywood icons the world left behind. Who were they, and how did their stories take such a heartbreaking turn? Let's find out. Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood had everything: beauty, talent, and an acting career most could only dream of. From West Side Story to Rebel Without a Cause, she was one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. But her success was overshadowed by the lingering mystery of her tragic death. In November 1981, Natalie was on a yacht with her husband, Robert Wagner, co-star Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain. What was supposed to be a relaxing trip turned into a nightmare when Natalie's body was found floating a mile from the boat. The official cause of death was drowning, but the details never quite added up. Rumors swirled about a heated argument between Natalie and Wagner that night, leading many to question what really happened. Though no charges were ever filed, the case was reopened years later, with Wagner named a person of interest. But even with renewed investigations, the truth remains elusive. Was it a tragic accident, or was something more sinister at play? The uncertainty surrounding Natalie's death has only added to her legacy, leaving behind more questions than answers. Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow captivated audiences with her chilling performance in Rosemary's Baby, but her real-life drama was even more disturbing than any horror film. For decades, her career has been overshadowed by her personal life, especially her relationship with director Woody Allen. They spent over a decade together, making films and raising children, until it all came crashing down. The scandal erupted when Mia discovered Allen was having an affair with her adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, a revelation that led to a bitter, very public custody battle. But the most shocking accusation was yet to come. Mia claimed that Allen had sexually abused their other adopted daughter, Dylan, sparking a controversy that still lingers today. Though no charges were ever filed, the allegations have followed both of them for years. On top of that, Mia suffered immense personal loss, with 3 of her adopted children passing away under heartbreaking circumstances. Despite everything, she has remained strong, dedicating her life to humanitarian work. But no matter what she accomplishes, the tabloid drama and painful scandals continue to cast a long shadow over her career. Would she have been remembered differently, if not for the chaos surrounding her personal life? It's a painful question, but one that defines her legacy. Mark Lester. Mark Lester was the adorable child actor who stole hearts as Oliver Twist in the 1968 film Oliver. But what happened to him after the spotlight faded? As a young boy, he trained at the Corona Academy of Dramatic Arts and beat out 5,000 other kids for the role that made him famous. But Hollywood has a short memory, and by the time he reached his late teens, the roles had vanished. One moment he was at the top, and the next, it was radio silence. No auditions, no offers, just the harsh reality that the industry had moved on without him. Then, out of nowhere, his life took a bizarre turn when he became friends with none other than Michael Jackson. The King of Pop was a huge fan of Oliver and formed an unlikely bond with Mark. But things got even stranger after Jackson's death, when rumors spread that Mark might be the biological father of Jackson's children. The speculation came from the fact that Mark had reportedly donated sperm to Jackson years earlier, though no real proof ever surfaced. Despite the media frenzy, Mark stayed out of the chaos and built a new life for himself, far from Hollywood. Instead of chasing a fading career, he trained as an osteopath and now works in the UK, content and completely removed from the glitz and drama of the entertainment world. His story is a classic tale of how quickly child stars can be forgotten, but unlike many others, he managed to carve out a new path for himself. Still, it leaves one to wonder, if Hollywood had given him a fair shot at adult roles, would his life have turned out differently? Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate was on the brink of superstardom, a rising actress with roles in films like Valley of the Dolls and The Fearless Vampire Killers. She had beauty, charm, and the kind of effortless screen presence that made Hollywood take notice. Married to acclaimed director Roman Polanski, her life seemed like a dream. But in one of the most horrifying crimes in American history, that dream was brutally cut short. On the night of August 8, 1969, followers of Charles Manson broke into her home and murdered her, along with 4 others. Sharon was 8 months pregnant, and the attack was so senseless and brutal that it shocked the world. What made it even worse was that she wasn't even the intended target. Manson had sent his followers to the house because he believed it belonged to someone else. Instead of being remembered for her talent and rising career, Sharon's name became forever linked to one of the darkest moments in Hollywood history. What could she have achieved if her life hadn't been stolen? We'll never know, but her tragic end remains one of the most haunting chapters in entertainment history. Patty Duke. Patty Duke was Hollywood's darling, winning an Oscar at just 16 for The Miracle Worker, but behind her bright smile was a life filled with turmoil. Pushed into stardom at a young age, she was controlled by managers who shaped her image, while she silently struggled with undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Her emotions swung between extreme highs and devastating lows, leading to reckless behavior, failed marriages, and years of personal chaos. While the world saw her as a talented actress, she was fighting an internal war she didn't understand. It wasn't until the 1980s that she was finally diagnosed, giving her the clarity she had desperately needed. Instead of letting the disorder define her, Patty became a passionate advocate for mental health, sharing her struggles to help others. Though her career had its ups and downs, she proved that overcoming personal battles was more important than Hollywood fame. Had she received help earlier, would her life have been different? Maybe. But in the end, she turned her pain into purpose, and that was her greatest achievement. Doris Day. Doris Day was America's golden girl, with a smile that could light up a room and a voice that made audiences swoon. From Calamity Jane to Pillow Talk, she was the picture of success, giving people a glimpse of Hollywood's golden age. But behind the sunny image was a woman whose life was anything but glamorous. The biggest shock came in 1968 when her husband, Martin Melcher, passed away. Instead of leaving her a fortune, he left her drowning in debt and trapped in a TV contract she never even knew she signed. One day, she was a beloved star, and the next, she was forced into a show she never wanted to do just to pay the bills. The Doris Day Show ran for 5 years, but once it ended, she had had enough. She walked away from Hollywood and never looked back. Instead, she dedicated her life to animal rights, finding joy in a world far removed from the one that had betrayed her. Fame had given her everything and taken it all away just as fast. But in the end, she chose a life that made her truly happy. Could she have continued as a top star? Absolutely. But for Doris, real happiness wasn't in Hollywood. It was in saving the animals who loved her unconditionally. George Sanders. George Sanders was the kind of actor who always seemed to have it all together. With his deep voice, sharp wit, and effortless charm, he became a Hollywood icon in films like Rebecca and All About Eve, winning an Oscar and living the life most people could only dream of. But beneath the polished exterior was a man struggling with demons he couldn't escape. Depression followed him for years, growing worse after his marriage to actress Zsa Gabor ended. As the 1960s rolled in, his career slowed down, and so did his will to keep up the act. By 1972, he had reached his breaking point. At 65, he checked into a hotel in Spain, left behind a farewell note dripping with his signature sarcasm, and ended his life. His parting words, "Dear world, I am leaving because I am bored." It was a final mic drop from a man who had spent years pretending he was fine. Sanders had the talent, the fame, and the lifestyle of a leading man, but none of it could fill the void inside him. Would things have been different if he had sought help? Ali MacGraw had it all: beauty, talent, and an Oscar nomination for Love Story, the film that made her one of the most sought-after actresses of her time. But Hollywood's love is fleeting, and Ali's career took a back seat when she fell for Steve McQueen, the ultimate bad boy of the silver screen. Their marriage seemed like a fairy tale from the outside, but behind closed doors, it was a different story. McQueen was controlling, and soon, Ali found herself sacrificing her career to keep their relationship afloat. By the time the marriage ended, Hollywood had already moved on, leaving her struggling to reclaim her place. On top of that, she battled addiction, a fight that nearly destroyed her. But instead of letting her downfall define her, she chose a different path. She went to rehab, rebuilt her life, and found peace away from the industry that once adored her. Though she never reached the same career heights again, she proved that success isn't always measured in fame. If she had stayed in Hollywood, would she have become one of its greatest icons? Perhaps, but she chose happiness over the spotlight, and that made her story even more powerful. Tuesday, Weld. Tuesday, Weld had the name of a movie star and the beauty to match, but her relationship with Hollywood was complicated from the start. She was thrown into the spotlight as a child, forced to become the family's breadwinner after her father died when she was just 3. By 9, she was modeling, and by 12, the pressure had already pushed her to a nervous breakdown, drinking, and even a suicide attempt. Instead of being protected, she was pushed further into fame, landing roles in films like The Cincinnati Kid and Pretty Poison. Hollywood adored her, but Tuesday didn't feel the same way. She turned down major roles, including Lolita and Bonnie and Clyde, because she simply didn't care about stardom. Behind the scenes, her life was just as messy. Failed marriages, estrangement from her children, and ongoing mental health struggles. By the time she reached her 70s, she had disappeared from the public eye completely, choosing solitude over the industry that had taken so much from her. She had the talent to become one of Hollywood's biggest icons, but she never wanted that life. Could she have been a legend? Rusty Hamer. Rusty Hamer was once one of the most recognized child actors in America, charming audiences as Rusty Williams on Make Room for Daddy. He practically grew up on television, spending over a decade in front of the camera. But when the show ended in 1964, so did his career. Hollywood had no use for him anymore, and the transition to adult roles never happened. He struggled to make ends meet, working odd jobs just to survive. With no real support system and a life that had peaked before he even hit adulthood, Rusty fell into a deep depression. By 1990, the weight of his struggles became too much to bear, and he took his own life at just 42. His tragic story is a harsh reminder of what happens when Hollywood chews up child stars and spits them out, leaving them to fend for themselves in a world that no longer cares. Could he have had a different fate if the industry had supported him after childhood fame? It's a painful thought, but one that echoes through the lives of many former child actors. Carolyn Jones. Most people remember Carolyn Jones as the glamorous, deadpan Morticia Addams, the gothic queen of the Addams Family. With her dark hair, haunting beauty, and razor-sharp wit, she became a pop culture icon. But her career was much more than just one role. Before Morticia, she had earned an Oscar nomination for The Bachelor Party and had worked alongside some of Hollywood's biggest names. But while she was making audiences laugh with her perfectly delivered one-liners, her real life was filled with suffering. Behind the scenes, Carolyn was battling serious health problems, and in the early 1980s, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. Even as the disease took its toll, she refused to stop working, filming her last scenes for the soap opera Capitol from a wheelchair, determined to keep going until the very end. She passed away in 1983 at just 53 years old, her talent and resilience overshadowed by the illness that claimed her life too soon. Though the world remembers her as Morticia, Carolyn Jones was so much more than that. Had she lived longer, what more could she have given to Hollywood? That's a question we'll never know the answer to. William Holden. William Holden was the epitome of a leading man, ruggedly handsome, endlessly charismatic, and one of the biggest stars of the 1950s and 1960s. With films like Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, and The Bridge on the River Kwai, he had an Oscar, a devoted fan base, and a career most actors could only dream of. But behind the Hollywood charm was a man who was battling demons. Alcohol had been a problem for years, and by the 1970s, it had completely taken over his life. Though he still landed roles, including a standout performance in Network, The effects of his drinking were impossible to ignore. Then, in 1981, tragedy struck. After a night of heavy drinking, Holden slipped, hit his head on a table, and bled to death alone in his apartment. Even worse, his body wasn't found for days. For a man who had once been the toast of Hollywood, his lonely, tragic end was almost unthinkable. Had he gotten help, could things have turned out differently? Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins will always be remembered as Norman Bates, the terrifying lead in Psycho who made audiences fear taking showers for years. His performance was unforgettable, but it also became a curse. No matter what other roles he took, he could never fully escape the shadow of Norman Bates. But that wasn't the only thing he kept hidden. In an era when being openly gay could destroy a Hollywood career, Perkins lived in secrecy, having relationships with men in private, while maintaining a public image that fit Hollywood's expectations. In 1973, he married photographer Barry Berenson, a move that some believed was more about survival in the industry than love. Then, in the early 1990s, he received devastating news. He had contracted HIV. Even worse, he didn't find out from a doctor but from a tabloid article that exposed his diagnosis before he even had a chance to process it himself. He passed away in 1992 from AIDS-related pneumonia, his life marked by both incredible success and painful isolation. Would he have had a different career if he hadn't been trapped by one role and forced to hide who he was? It's a heartbreaking question with no easy answer. How could Hollywood's brightest stars fade into darkness so tragically? Their names once lit up marquees, but time and fate had other plans. Some were forgotten, others were lost too soon. But their stories still haunt the industry today. If you found these stories as fascinating as we did, don't let this be the last deep dive into Hollywood's hidden past. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because there's always another untold story waiting to be uncovered. Who knows what shocking Hollywood secret we'll uncover next? Grit will uncover next. Grit will uncover next.